Welcome, everybody. I'm glad everyone was able to join. Thank you, Derek, for having us here. Before we start, I just wanted to say thank you to the Eye on Earth community. Um, we've been members for a long time, and we continue to support Eye on Earth in numerous ways, and we've done so over the years in some of our work. So I want to just extend the thanks to the community, as Derek did in the beginning, and ensure that you all know that we want to support the work of Eye on Earth as we move ahead. Our presentation is on an open platform to motivate stakeholder action towards achieving the global goals. I'm going to introduce just at the broad level ESRI's user community and work around this, and we'll get to see some live demos after my brief introduction. So the world is facing a lot of different challenges, and we really feel that geography can contribute to solving these challenges. Our belief is that GIS provides the platform for achieving sustainable development, and maps are language for common understanding on progress and challenges in achieving the goals. And we want to try to really quit the kind of idea that we have to think in terms of limitations as what to a map is in itself. You know, we think of a map as a platform for conversations around sustainable development, and this is the ability to bring things into view that brings in other views and my views about how to achieve a specific objective. So we see GIS enabling a sustainable world, and particularly helping to achieve the SDGs. Overall, ESRI, its vision is to serve its users who are doing a massive amount of work in human environment understanding and education. So it's really about the community, your community, and how we can support that community driving GIS, advancing GIS and spatial science that underpins this geographic community. And we will continue to do that through a number of the things you see here. Our community is extremely large. We serve several million users across 130 different countries that have many different interests in both professional backgrounds, in terms of cultures and academic disciplines, and really connects everyone across the planet. Really, what at the core of what we are trying to do is to showcase our users' work. We go through thousands of exchanges with our users to understand their needs, and going really deep in some of the use cases, looking at their maps and their environments to really try to understand the challenges and issues on the planet, from climate change to food production to humanitarian relief, and to making cities and communities better. So before I jump into the SDGs, I'm going to burn through 3 slides that I think are extremely important before we talk about the SDGs. These 3 slides I'm not going to speak to, but I will provide them at the end of the presentation to the group to circulate, because it's critical for everyone to understand that census and statistics offices have an enormous amount of work to do, and they're embarking on an extremely challenging and exciting journey to collect, disseminate, and provide information around the SDGs. So these next 3 slides, pre-enumeration, enumeration, and post-enumeration, are familiar with people that understand census, but it's just important to understand that census processes provide the base level activity and the base data for a lot of the sustainable development goals. So as I move through the different phases, you can see the different business processes for the use of GIS in the different phases. And again, I'm not going to go into detail here, but I'm just showing you that process. We have a lot of different tools and capabilities that support census, and we're happy to take questions on those, perhaps offline, just because it's not the core topic here, but I think it's important to understand that we have a huge community of users around the world in statistics offices, and we've been supporting their work for a very, very long time. So to the global goals, these goals are enormous. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of goals, targets, and indicators. And at the end of the day, we believe GIS provides the framework and process to understand the goals to enable a smarter world. The technology itself, we believe, can bring value to all of the SDGs, not the ones that are, for example, required of geographic information, but all of them as a whole through the framework outlined here. And we believe that GIS can help to illustrate the challenges of the goals by abstracting information to help people understand and visualize as well as inform the world. The SDGs provide a framework that allows you to analyze the relationships between phenomena and model them and create understanding. It's a framework within which we can design and plan for the future. And really, for us, it extends that geo-design philosophy initiated by Carl Steins and others in the past. So our users are doing a tremendous amount of work around the SDGs, and we want to try to leverage our user community and enable them to showcase their work. There's a large body of this work that we've shared in numerous past presentations, and that we'll continue to share as they flourish around the SDGs. So these are just illustrating some of the examples of applications and capabilities of the technology and our user community around specific goals. We have, again, an extended set of this work, but this just gives you an idea of, for example, good health and well-being, that the map on the top right is really illustrating at the work of WHO during the Ebola outbreak, and the amount of information that was captured there that has now lived on to feed into the health community itself in the areas that were largest hit by Ebola. So a lot of the work we do, in fact, probably everybody that we interact with, and you all as well, can relate their work to the SDGs in some way, and can likely provide some significant value. Again, these next set are just the remainder of the goals, showing some of the examples for specific goals and how some of the user community is addressing some of these goals. We really, at the end of the day, want to bridge the knowledge gap between GIS and the sustainable development community. We want to make sure that they have the tools that they need to do their work better, faster, and in a more streamlined fashion. So we've been coming up with different solutions and iterating over them with our users to try to figure out what solutions might be best for them to engage in the SDGs, understand them, integrate them into their work, and we do that through an open, interoperable platform called ArcGIS. The platform, again, serves millions of users. The numbers are astounding. I won't go into them now, but they're out there, and people can see the wide user base that exists. It's a technology agnostic platform, and we try to really keep focus on the global community and discussion around interoperability and openness. At the base, it serves the online community and offline through different capabilities such as desktop in allowing a wide base of tools to be used really rapidly, and it's a configurable platform. So we believe in configure first, customize later kind of approach, where anyone can pick up the technology and use it to suit their specific need with very little customization. We're really trying to strive to make the platform configurable for many different types of industry sectors and scenarios, to focus on different user needs and a wide range of user requirements. We also understand that technology is only a piece of it, and that people, process are extremely critical. People being obviously the most important. So as we iterate over a lot of the work that we do, we really try to bring in new ideas. And one I'll just end on before we go into some of the demos is the webGIS concept and a service-based approach for openness. And we've really moved towards the webGIS environment as a way forward for the world to share and collaborate more effectively. And that's been a really large step for us, and we're still moving through that step. But we believe it's the future, and it has bared significant fruit in terms of our user community. There's some significant interest there. So I'll end now with this quote, just illustrating the need to address the SDGs differently in terms of what we've done in the past. The MDGs, for example, we need to take a new approach, thinking of back in terms of what we need to do better, and also thinking in terms of no more business as usual. We need to change the paradigm of how we work to achieve these goals, and we believe webGIS and other innovations are a demonstration of this jump. We want to encourage this demonstration. So we're trying to inhibit our user communities to think differently. So without further ado, we'll go into some of the demos. I hope that intro was useful, and Derek, I think I can turn it over to Adam, who can show us some of the more interesting aspects of the presentation today.
Great, thank you, Charles. Thanks for that background and context setting. Adam, I've transferred the presenter mode to yourself. You should have a dialogue on the screen, and if you accept that, then you will be the presenter. There we go.
And Derek, and just if you wouldn't mind letting me know if you could see my screen.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, great, thanks. So I'd like to just walk through some of the concepts and the examples, some prototype apps and some things that you could actually get going with right away with context around the SDGs. And one of the things I'd like to start with is just a simple dashboard view of the goals. And one of the things that I was kind of tasked with when I first joined the nonprofit team was to kind of make sense of the goals and try to visualize them and really figure out an engaging way to get people interested in them and understand what's going on. And my first idea was to really just understand the data structure of the goals, right? So 17 goals, each goal has a set of targets, each target has a set of indicators, right, and the numbers get bigger as you kind of walk through that hierarchy. There's a lot of data there, as Charles mentioned. So what I wanted to do is put it in this format to let people explore and engage with some of that data. So I've got some samples here, and we'll just take a look at what's going on. And I clicked on target 1.1 for goal 1, which is no poverty. So at the top, we can list the target by 2030, eradicate extreme poverty. And underneath it, we're actually going to visualize those indicators. 1.1.1 is the poverty gap at national poverty lines. And of course, we're ESRI, and we love mapping things, and we love visualizing things with a spatial context, but we also realize that not everything is a map, right? So it could be an effective way to visualize that data is just show me the bottom 15 countries for that poverty gap information. And maybe we need to pay special attention to those countries, or look at how we can help fund those countries in different ways, or see what their current status is. And of course, it may not be a chart. Maybe it's just a story map preview. And here we're looking at information coming from the Urban Observatory, and it's actually a preview of a story map that I can launch in a new window that gives me more information about global poverty. We'll take a look at a few more examples, but before we do that, I mentioned an easy way to kind of navigate the goals. With this application, I can go and select on any one of the goals. I can take a look at all the targets since I've selected goal 1. We can look at all the targets for goal 1, and then we can actually drill into the indicators for each. So here's the indicator, and I view the metadata, and this is the actual metadata coming from the United Nations Department of Statistics. I can see the full report, who's responsible for the data, how it's defined, how it's computed, the rationale, and so on. So if we switch to a couple more examples, this one we're looking at goal 2. Again, we see the target at the top. We can look at the percent undernourished, and then the percent undernourished with the bottom 15 countries as well. And then we can also drill into the country level. So we looked at a couple global views, but now we're actually at the country level for Kenya, and we're looking at the county level. So we're looking at the percent of infants 0 to 59 months that have been breastfed. And then we see on the right just a couple summary statistics showing us the key information, percent stunting, percent wasting. And Charles mentioned that our platform is built on open standards, and we can pull in information coming from a lot of different data sources. In this case, it's coming from the Kenyan Open Data site. And we can do that at a lot of different levels. Here's an example for Thailand. We're looking at the number of HIV cases for goal 3. And again, we have just a different layout on the screen showing the different provinces within Thailand, and again, a chart at the bottom. All right, so we're going through this large volume of information, and we're visualizing the indicators in a lot of different ways. It's a good way to get people involved and interested in the SDGs, and people who do have a good interest in it will be likely to pick it up and maybe put their own spin on it. And people just sort of kind of walking by, maybe see your screen and see what you're looking at. They're like, hey, what is that? That looks interesting, and you can start the conversation that way. And what we have sort of powering that type of application is an open data site. And this is what we are referring to as an SDG hub. And it really brings together a lot of these people, citizens, people in the private sector, people from research, academia, and governments. We're all going to need to get together around these things to achieve the goals, right? And what I just showed you is an example of a dashboard. And I'll show you some more examples as we go forward. But this open data site can really unlock all the data related to the goals. And if I click on goal 5, I can see some of the data sets that are associated or tagged with goal 5. Right, so I see some data from the World Bank. I can click on that, and that data will load in the map. I can get a description of it. I can view it as a table, view it as a chart if I'd like. But one of the key points to this is, in order to build an application like you just saw, the dashboard, we make this information available as an API. So I can just reference this data set as GeoJSON as a service, and I can just include that in my application. So that way, whenever the data set gets updated, in this case from the World Bank, I don't have to go and re-download it, re-transform it. It's just being served to me in on an open standard that I can bring into any of my applications. And of course, if I wanted to, I could download that data set as a spreadsheet, KML, or shapefile. But really, the power is coming from this enabled open data site to let you serve out the data in these open formats. Now I'd like to switch over to another application, which we call a contributor style application. And what that means is, as someone who is part of the data management process, in order to walk data through and make sure that the quality is there, it's up to the standards that we want as part of my organization, this application could be used to help with that process. So I've signed in, it knows who I am and what I have access to, and I can go through the different groups that I'm a part of. I can search through my groups, and in this case there's actually a group called Services and Services Staging Group. So that service that we were just looking at, the World Bank Data Service, could be put into this group. Someone could say, hey, this service is ready to go. I think it needs to be exposed to the public. But before we do that, let's put it through this process. Let's put it into this group, and then someone else can take a look at that. And then what happens, once it puts into the group, it's automatically scored, and I can see some of the metadata associated with that item. In this case, for this particular item, it's missing a description. So if I wanted to, I could say, please add a description, and I could send that off to the person who submitted it. That way they could update all the information that they need, and once we get this number up to an acceptable score, we can say that yes, this is in fact an accepted item, and then behind the scenes we could automatically put this item into the open data site. And that's just one sort of conceptual workflow that you could put data and services through to make sure that it's being looked at for quality. Another application, which is a configurable application, I'll switch over to this one, is what we refer to as a crowdsourced story map. And for this particular application, I didn't do any custom coding at all. Charles mentioned configure first. Most of our templates are all available on GitHub if you need to take them that next step of customization. But we really are we're aiming to have at least 80, 90% of what you need in a configurable application. And this is an example of one of those. So what we do is we encourage people to use this map to really put their commitment to the SDGs on the map. So where are you? If you wanted to add your voice, you could sign in with a provider. You could just continue, pick a photo, put your name and location on the map, and tell why this particular goal makes sense to you or why you're committed to that goal. And then once you submit it, your image will show up on the map, and you'll be able to see everybody else's as well. So it's a fun, engaging style application, and it lets people really sort of voice their commitment to the SDGs. Now here's an example of that same crowdsourcing story map that we, in partnership with Project Everyone, who is an organization sort of leading the PR and promotion of the goals. In partnership with them, I took this application, I downloaded it from GitHub, and we made a few changes. And what they wanted to do is they have this initiative called the World's Largest Lesson. And really that is all about going to teachers across the world and giving them lesson plans that are specifically focused on the SDGs, so that teachers can teach this to kids and they can get them involved at a young age. And this one was focused on surveying community decision makers and influencers that surround you and show what the gender equality ratio looks like. And what that means is participation in the survey walks you through this form. So are you an individual? What's your age? Where are you located? And then you select the answers to the question. Who is your prime minister or president? Who represents you in Parliament or Congress? And you can begin to fill out the people that are in roles of influence or leadership in your community. And you can see the ratio dynamically changing as you go through. And when you're done and you hit submit, you can see the ratio. So this was a very exciting and successful application that we got a lot more entries, I think, than we were initially expecting, and we're almost up to 10,000 entries. And this was really in a course of maybe 4 to 5 months, which was more than they expected. And this was great for the public to take a look at this, to enter in information, but for Project Everyone and their world's largest lesson team, they were actually able to hook into this service because all this data is just going to a service, and they were able to have another view of it, right? So here we're looking at the exact same data, but we have another dashboard style view. And this is just, again, a configurable application. And I said, I want to use this service, the same one from that crowdsourcing application. And then I just configured these little widgets. Here I have a summary statistic showing me just the raw total that's coming in. I have a little legend here that shows me what the points on the map are. So I can see all the entries in orange, and I can see the ones from the last 3 days in that green, larger green circle. And it shows me what the average ratio is. What login service, maybe that's important to me if I may need to see who's coming in from where. And then I just have a handful of questions on the right-hand side that show me the raw numbers, the answers to each question. This is, again, a configurable application that the team from the world's largest lesson could use to monitor this data as it comes in. And then another configurable application, this is called the Live Maps. And what this means is you can search through a couple different providers. In this case, we're looking at tweets, but you could also configure it to search through images from Flickr. And if you have other streams and services, you could actually configure it to use those as well. And this is one of those templates where I took it just a little bit further since it is downloadable from GitHub. All I did was add this nice little rotating SDG logo at the top, and I added a search box to let us tweak the searches that are coming in. So in this case, we're looking at SDG 5, which is gender equality. And when the map loads, it shows me a couple points, and if there's no geolocation for the point, it'll just put it right in the middle of the map. But if there are geolocations for the points, we can zoom into an area. And we can actually switch the goals that we're looking at. So I'll go to life below water. And we can see we've got a few tweets there. There's one off the coast or down in Barcelona that is tagged with SDG 14. And you can change how you search through this application. If you want to add different keywords, you can do that too. And again, you can actually switch this to search Flickr if you want just a raw, it's just search through images again. So if you have a specific focus, maybe you're only interested or you're only focused on goal 2 or goal 6, which is clean water, you can configure the template. You don't need to do all the stuff that I've done. You can just configure it to search for goal 6 and add a couple keywords, and then you can have this application up and running in minutes. This isn't a thing where you need to flesh out implementation and go through a couple months of development and then have it ready. It can be done within a matter of minutes. And this last one I'd like to show you is called Insights. This is a relatively new application that we've developed and put out, and it's really geared toward that answering questions of your data. So you can see it's kind of got a dashboard look and feel, but you get a lot more power than you would just from some of the examples I was showing you before. And what we're looking at right now is a couple cards on our workbook, as we call it here in Insights, looking at the prevalence of undernourishment. But we're also bringing in information about the proportion of overweight children. And sometimes it makes sense to look at those together, right? So where are the problems, or where are the high numbers for the proportion of overweight children, and where's the prevalence of undernourishment? Do those areas overlap? Do they, are they in line with what we're thinking, or do we notice new trends? Right? Should we be focusing in another area, or are questions that we were asking initially, were they wrong? And what this application can let us do is start to ask those questions. So I'm just going to quickly add that data again, I'll show you how I made some of these pages. And I'm going to add in that prevalence of undernourishment data. And right away you can see it's going to bring it into the map for me. It knows it has a spatial element to it, so it's going to map the data for me. Of course, I can change that style. I can say, show me that information by counts and amounts by size. And right away, it'll give me an initial classification. It'll sort of scan the data and give me what it thinks might be helpful to look at right away. I can change that information, how it's styled, if I want to. Or I can just go back to sort of a shaded view with color. We'll leave that there. But on the left-hand side, I can see that I can have access to all the attributes in the data. So there's information about the country code, the name. If I want to create a chart with the name and the actual value, I just check those on, drag it over, and say I want to create a chart. And this isn't all that helpful, this bar chart, so I can change the type. I have a couple different options, a column chart, a donut chart. I'm going to choose this bubble chart here, so I can get a quick view right away of that data and see where the high numbers are. And here we can see the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And as I click on the chart, the map updates and it sort of highlights it for me. And you can see that goes both ways. When I click on India, India is then highlighted in my other chart too. So I didn't have to do anything to set that up. All I did was take fields from the same data set, drag it over and create an element on my workbook, and the two can talk to each other. As I interact with one, the other updates, and vice versa. And of course, I can also take that information and create a similar type chart that breaks it down by year. And what that allows me to do is, you can see on the left-hand side, it's scanned my data and it knows that there is a date-time property to that information. So what I did is I took the year information and the area and the value, and I dragged that over, and it allowed me to pivot that information based on that data. So we can take that information and create different types of research and analysis that lets us ask the questions that we're interested in. How are we doing at a subnational level, at the county level for Kenya? Right? How are the different sub-counties doing in relation to agriculture, crop achievement? And this is an application that is, again, it's relatively new. There's a lot of power behind it, and there's a lot more that we'll be adding to it in the coming months. So, and I wanted to end on this GitHub site. If you don't know what GitHub is, it is a open coding platform. It allows anybody to share code and share information and collaborate around it. And what we're doing is we're collaborating with the United Nations Statistics Division to create a conceptual or prototype API around the metadata. So going back to what you saw here, all this information about goals, targets, indicators, this is all coming from an API like this. So you can build these applications, combine it with your open data site, your spatial information, and really create some innovative and engaging applications and information products. And as we go forward, I didn't want to, most, if not all of what I showed is available on GitHub. It's open source. Anybody can download it. We encourage people to go to the templates and, use them. Not only use them, but contribute back by saying, even if it's not through contributing through code, or it's really about using the issues tab here and creating a conversation around what this should have. So maybe the metadata is missing something, or maybe something is broken with the API. And we want people to really form a community around this so that it's developed in the open and everybody knows what's there from the start, and we can make it into something that will really be a solid sort of Lego block or building block that we can use to make these innovative applications. Like Charles mentioned, you know, it's gonna take all of us to get there, and we really need to take these steps to make those big leaps coming in the future in order to get this done. And with that, I think I'll stop there, and we're maybe going to questions.
Right. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Charles. Yes, we will hand over to questions now. And just whilst you think of your questions and put your questions, I wonder if I could just ask for a vote of thanks to our speakers from a representative of the Eye on Earth Alliance. Craig Hansen from the World Resources Institute is on the line. Craig.
Thank you, Derek. Hello, everyone. I'm Craig Hansen. I'm the Global Director of Food, Forest, and Water at the World Resources Institute, and I'm WRI's representative on the Eye on Earth Alliance. And on behalf of the Alliance, I'd like to thank the speakers from ESRI for a very interesting presentation during this webinar. Monitoring for the SDGs is very aligned with the Eye on Earth mission, and I presume aligned with many of your missions as well. And it was a fantastic presentation and a fantastic architecture that they've built together. WRI has had a long relationship with ESRI, doing great work on forests and other issues in the past, and I think this contribution we saw today to the cause is yet again another contribution by ESRI. So thank you on behalf of the Eye on Earth Alliance.
Thank you very much, Craig. So now we do have a few questions, and I will start with a question here where the questioner has asked me to read the question on their behalf. The questioner is Mr. Robert Laurie. He says, sorry, cannot speak by microphone. Please read my question. I work for the GIS department of the Peace Parks Foundation, an NGO currently operating from South Africa but involved in many countries within transfrontier conservation areas in Africa. At the moment, the GBIF, which is the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, has a specific standard, the Darwin standard, for defining how data must be collected and structured so it can be fed into their databases. He says, I'd like to know, in terms of the SDGs, specifically Goal 13, which is the climate change goal, what standards and procedures there are regarding incorporating data for the SDG, i.e. how can PPF data speak to the SDGs. So I hope that question is clear. PPF is the Peace and Parks Foundations. How can his organization's data speak to the SDGs? So this, I think, is a question of data formats and interoperability. If perhaps I'll open the microphone for both Charles and Adam, so you can decide how to answer between yourselves. Charles, Adam, are you able to respond to our questioner?
Sure. Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I hear you, Charles.
Beautiful. That's very fascinating, just hearing the work of PPF in terms of the standards that they're developing. I think for us, and Adam could also speak to this, data formats and interoperability to address, incorporating their specific standard into some of the capabilities and processes we provide would be extremely fascinating and interesting to us. So maybe offline we can have a conversation, but just to kind of address that, we are just providing the information on the goals, targets, indicators, and methodology, and supporting the different working groups around the different SDGs. So we're not, we're just enablers in terms of helping with those standards for specific SDGs, but we don't have any authority over the determination of specific standard or methodology for the SDG itself. But we can certainly share that with the community, and I think that's where it gets really interesting in terms of just being able to share that structured format that PPF has to our community and others as we move along through this difficult task of trying to achieve the SDGs. Adam might have some thoughts on the more technical data format component of PPF's work, but that's my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I would just comment that we do work with a lot of standards. I think you said Darwin was the name of the standard, and I just did a quick search on my machine for Darwin. It looks like it might be an XML based. I'm sorry, I'm not immediately familiar with it, but most, if not all, of the formats for metadata and standards we can ingest. Since our platform is pretty open, we can, if we don't support it natively, we can write a script that would ingest it into our platform so that it can be used.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. There is a question from Simon Wilson. Simon, let me just find you on the list here and open your mic. Simon he said that he has to leave the call in a moment, so I will bring you to the top of the queue. Simon, your mic is open.
Excellent, thank you, Derek, and thank you to you both, Charles and Adam, for your great presentation. It's really illuminating to see this kind of work going on. The question I have is, how can we use this tool to influence people's behavior? And I suppose at the heart of that question is, how can we get people to understand the relationship between their behavior or the socioeconomic situation and the impact that that might have on the environment that they're surrounded by? Are there apps out there that are being developed to help do that? Can you see a role for that? Just tell us your thoughts about how we can influence people's behavior by illuminating for them the impact that they have from their behavior on their environment.
Yeah, I'm happy to. That's a great question, and the easy answer is technology will never do that, right? That's the easy answer. But there is something to be said in terms of bringing the capabilities and the use of technology to the apex, I guess, or point of where action can be understood. So what we've been doing is, through the platform, making it configurable and adjustable to any type of initiatives. We've moved towards this idea of building capabilities that allow the technology to be flexible and dynamic to get to a certain business need. So, for example, maybe some are familiar with this, but we're moving towards a concept called the Geo Hub, and it's now been implemented in several cities. But what that is in detail quickly, is communities have aspirations. Those community aspirations get translated into initiatives. Now, those initiatives, people want to join those initiatives and have a way to do that. So what we are moving towards is creating a let's say technology environment to allow local governments, local communities to bring data in from various different agencies, organizations, and start their own to address a specific initiative. So in LA, for example, there's an initiative called Vision Zero, and the LA Geo Hub, which they've started, has been facilitating Vision Zero, which actually came from, I believe, Europe. That Vision Zero initiative grounded itself in Los Angeles, but what we're seeing now, and communities have joined that initiative locally, but now also throughout different communities across the U.S., other initiatives that are related or directly Vision Zero initiatives are joining together as this collective. And what we're seeing is this hub approach to tackling challenges across the community in terms of community meetings, specific applications that support a specific need, stories and narratives, and we're trying to just provide that technology environment to enable the kind of further enable an actionable approach to some of the behavior and influence that is needed to change policy. Adam, do you have thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, no, just a brief one, but I think at the heart of that hub initiatives that we're slowly rolling out with different cities, the core concept, or kind of how that came about is just because you have open data doesn't mean you're actually doing things, right? So you have open data, that's great. Now what? Just because you have open data, that doesn't mean that my community is safer, right? You need to actually create action around that data and get people involved, and that leads to engagement too. So the majority of the communities aren't going to go to your open data site and look for the endpoint, right? I showed that you can access the endpoint programmatically, but my mom isn't going to do anything with that because she's my mom and she wants to read something about it. So maybe the more engaging thing to do is through these initiatives have things like narratives and story maps, really rich, engaging websites that you can share on social media and that really outline the message of what's going on, say with Vision Zero, with really rich charts and, again, maps put into that. But at the end, you're sort of walking them through a story of your data. At the end, you're calling them to action to get involved and telling them how they can do that. And really, that's what we're striving towards.
Yeah, that's great. Really, as I say, very useful to know that this exists out there. Is there a way of getting sort of technical support to set all this up?
Yes, yes, there is. We do have a hub team. It's actually a global team, so depending on where you are, we can support you in getting more information. But certainly, and it's, again, this is something that we're really excited about, and we're trying to think and ask the community how we can kind of incorporate this into the SDG process, because there's obviously links to using some of this framework for the SDGs. So indeed, I don't want to take too much time, but we can certainly chat offline about that if you'd like more information.
Excellent. I'd like that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Simon, and thank you for the answers. We have a couple of questions, in fact, from Dr. Kostas Teregas. Kostas, I saw that you had a quick interchange in the chat with Charles, but if you want to put the question for the benefit of the audience. Your mic is open, Kostas.
Yeah, so both have to do with how we as users can come together with ESRI as a technology provider. I did pose a question about the various kind of business models with which ESRI comes in contact with different verticals, and I think I got a good answer from our ESRI friends in terms of the open data strategies and tools. What I wanted to ask is, as technology changes, everybody's migrating to the web. And ESRI began as a company that had instances of software loaded onto our computers, paying licenses to ESRI and so on. With this big migration to the cloud and the potential that it gives for collaboration, can you remind us in terms of for new users of GIS, what are the benefits and disbenefits of cloud-based services, and how would costs shake down if you're an NGO, for example, and want to use some of the spectacular technology we've just seen? How do I get involved, and what are the business models that I would have to invoke? Thanks very much.
So hi, Kostas. Good question, and the standard question. I think the root of that is our NGO program. I mean, the first component of the question, the first part of the question on kind of the webGIS paradigm that we're seeing and the massive uptake there is essentially the user identity model. That's changed the world in terms of, if you think of all the social media and different email accounts, and the way we use the web is through this user identity framework that everyone's been adopting and has been very successful. So we've now taken that that user identity approach a while back now, and in terms of the technology, we're trying to actually adapt the capabilities to each user. We're trying to identify roles and what type of users people are so they can get all the capabilities that they need and not be overwhelmed, because as you know, the tool is extremely overwhelming if you enter as a novice, for example. And we are now we've embarked and are still embarking on making it democratizing GIS across different types of user groups. So I think that technology changes. We are currently, and we're always observing those changes. This is why we have made it so far in 46 years, is being on top of the innovation. We've innovated. Our R&D costs are extremely high, and we'll go into that. But that's for a reason. To keep on top of these tech changes, keep our users abreast. And in terms of the NGO, I realize we're at the top of the hour. I'm sorry, I can't. I would love to talk more about that question. And engagement. How can people get engaged? We have a nonprofit program. It's global. It's a global program. The nonprofits get access to the technology for essentially an admin fee, largely for entering into a program. They can get access to the technology. And usually it's just a process of submitting nonprofit status in whatever country you are in, and making sure that that is indeed verified. So for instance, here in the US it's 5013C, but it could be something else elsewhere. And you can go to the ESRI nonprofit site and apply directly. And of course, we're here to support those on the call that might be interested.
So we're heading, as you say, to the top of the hour, so we need to bring it to a conclusion. There is, if we can just request your time, speakers, for one more question. There is a question here from Miriam Badino. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Hi, nice to meet you, and thanks for the interesting presentation. It was really a nice webinar. My question was actually if you explore some interaction with existing data online, like for example the carbon climate registry, or similar tools that are already including a lot of data. And how do you, for example, I was checking one of the websites for the SDG 11, and I saw that there are some cities, some things, but it could be really a lot more if there is any interaction foreseen.
Yeah, again, I'll approach that just to say the Carbon Climate Registry, I mean, I'm familiar with just personally, but what we try to do is provide our curated data sets, our users' curated data sets, in an easy way to access through our ArcGIS Online or through other means like desktop and other tools, through the Living Atlas. The Living Atlas holds a catalog of data sets, global to local, demography, socioeconomics, environment, and the Living Atlas really has that is our curation component of a lot of the data that we see our users wanting to access regularly. So the way that we approach, for example, the Carbon Climate Registry, is to encourage them to submit that to the Living Atlas, to have that available to all of our users directly and more rapidly. And if you saw early in the presentation, you saw that contributor application that Adam has presented. That really speaks to the SDGs, and we want our users to actually figure out how we can leverage that, or they can leverage that in submitting data related to the SDGs, like you're articulating. So how that's a question, I guess, more than an answer in terms of the applications we're building to support that vetting process. How can we kind of support the community in deriving this kind of SDG atlas ourselves or with our user community, or what is the best way to do that if it's feasible? These are questions we're trying to think about in terms of incorporating this type of information. Does that get at your question?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe it's it's too complex to put them together, and it's easier to get just the citizens' idea through the app instead of overloading with more data from the cities. I mean, did I get it correct?
It's just an easier way to kind of, we haven't figured it out in terms of the SDGs, but in the way we approach the Living Atlas, I think that's correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the question, Miriam.